Coming up on Not the End, NDE.
And she said, well, if you don't listen to me, listen to him. And she kind of indicated to her right. And there was a very faint door in the wall. Again, white, glowing white. And it opened and this figure came through. Now, I'm not a religious person, Phil, in any stretch of the imagination. I've studied at university. I have a fascination for people who have faith and why people believe in things. I studied psychology, parapsychology, and sociology. I completely understand why people choose to have a faith structure, but I don't. I kind of take bits from all over the place. I would say that my path to that point had been spiritual rather than religious. But had I been a stereotypical Christian, I guess, I would have said that this gentleman who came through looked remarkably like Jesus Christ.
Many have died and returned to tell of their near-death experiences. Their incredible stories reveal to the living that this is not the end.
Hi, my name is Kevin Milsom. I live in the west of England, close to the border with Wales, in the county of Gloucestershire. And back in 2018, I had an experience which kind of changed my life in many ways. I was very ill with sepsis. I didn't quite realise how ill I was. I'd never stayed in hospital before. I'd always been ridiculously healthy. I was 55 years of age. And suddenly I was in hospital with sepsis, which I'd had for about a week. It had been undiagnosed. And by the time they got me to hospital, I was in a very poor state of health. I had immediate surgery. My right foot was full of sepsis to the point where it had gone deeply into my bones. I had immediate surgery and they were able to remove part of my foot and to get rid of some of the sepsis. But the next day it was decided that I would need my right leg amputated because it wasn't going to happen. And if it went above my knee, it was game over. So I came to accept the fact that I was going to have one leg or die. Not really an option, is it really, I suppose. And on the morning before the operation to remove my leg, they wake you up every hour in hospital. And I didn't realise that they do that because they want to make sure that you're not dead. So I didn't realise how ill I was. And I woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, or I was woken up by 5 o'clock in the morning, and I couldn't go back to sleep. And I didn't feel very well. I'd had heart issues on the operating table where my heart had stopped, and they had to bring me back. I was accepting of the fact that I was going to lose my leg. I had no problem with that at all. I didn't feel very well, and I went to eventually reach for the button by the side of the bed to alert a nurse to say, look, I'm not very well. And the next thing, I must have fallen back on the bed because I'm flying down a tunnel feet first. I've got both feet intact. I'm flying down a tunnel, like warp 3. I'm aware of a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm aware of that the inside is lit as well. And I emerge from the tunnel after, I guess, a few seconds. And I emerge into this white room, this beautiful, powerful white room. A white like I've never experienced it before in my life. It felt like the room was alive. Everything glowed white, the floor, the ceiling, the walls. And in front of me were some people. I recognised my mother, who had died, do some maths, 9 years before, and my stepfather, who had died 13 years previously. And my mother came running towards me, which was very odd because when my mother died, she was immobile. She was in a very, very poor state of health, couldn't walk, was never going to walk again, had dementia. And she came bounding towards me like a teenager. As I said, she'd been gone for 9 years. And she started talking to me and telling me about heaven. And I guess I was still in a state of shock. I hadn't really taken it in. I was kind of, oh, that's nice. Oh, this is nice. I wasn't aware that I had died. I wasn't aware that this was a spiritual place. I saw my mother and I kind of accepted, oh, there's Mum. Didn't really question it. And she was telling me about heaven and so the spirit world or whatever you want to call it. It's just a name. And she was telling me how wonderful it was and the animals and the plants, and I was going to love it there. And as I say, I was still in a state of shock, Phil, because I couldn't take it in. It was too much. At the same time, I was also heightened mentally, I felt like I was Data for Star Trek. I could absorb information very, very quickly. I was taking in lots of stimuli, looking over here, looking over there, looking at her, trying to work out what she was saying, aware of my stepfather, who was standing dutifully in the background, letting his wife talk, as per usual. And I began to kind of have an internal dialogue while my mother was talking. And I began to kind of realize, I guess, where I was. And I began to get cross with myself, I guess. And so it felt like I was having a kind of life review. I was having an internal dialogue with myself. And I was analysing my life. Okay, I got married. Okay, I'd had kids. Okay, I'd had jobs, work, career. I'd home educated the kids for 12 years. I'd done this, I'd done that. And then I got to the have I done enough bit, especially creatively, because I do a lot of writing. I'm a musician. And I never done anything with it. I'd always been fearful of I'm not sure what, and I'd backed away. I'd had a chance to become a professional musician. I'd walked away from that. I'd had a chance to get several books published. I'd walked away from those opportunities. And it began to really hit home with me. Had I done enough with my life? I was 55. Had I done enough? I guess the short answer was no, I hadn't. And this really began to weigh on my mind. And my mother was still talking. And eventually she realised I wasn't really listening to what she was saying. Probably, again, as usual. And she said, oh, you're not listening to me again. I'm trying to tell you, about this and that, and you're miles away. Which I was. And she said, well, if you don't listen to me, listen to him. And she kind of indicated to her right. And there was a very faint door in the wall. Again, white. Glowing white. And it opened and this figure came through. Now, I'm not a religious person, Phil, in any stretch of the imagination. I've studied it at university. I have a fascination for people who have faith and why people believe in things. I studied psychology, parapsychology, and sociology. I completely understand why people choose to have a faith structure, but I don't. I kind of take bits from all over the place. I would say that my path to that point had been spiritual rather than religious. But had I been a stereotypical Christian, I guess, I would have said that this gentleman who came through looked remarkably like Jesus Christ. He had the beard, he had this white shimmering robe. His eyes were incredible. But most of all, it was his energy. And his energy, I really, and as I say, I work as a writer, I can't get close to it. Just over 6 years down the line, I can't get close to describing that in vocabulary. The energy and the power of this individual who came through that door. And he walked up to me and his eyes were, and this is another odd thing, my mother had been talking to me with her mouth. A lot. And this gentleman didn't. He spoke to me with his mind. I could hear his voice within my head, and he said to me, why are you here? And I literally said back to him, that's a very good question. I've got no idea. I've got no idea. I'm in hospital 1 minute, I don't feel very well, now I'm here, and I'm taking all this in. And again, it's slowly dawning on me, hang on a minute, this isn't a usual Friday, something's off here. And I kind of realised where I was. I think it set in. And he could sense my anger at myself, not at anybody else. And he was the epitome of patience, compassion, empathy, kindness, love, light, whatever you want, whatever words, and they won't be adequate. He was just a phenomenal force of nature, a spirit, spirituality. He said again, why are you here? I said, I don't know. He said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. And my mother had said, through that door you'll find everything. And I knew if I went through that, I knew the door was a barrier. I knew if I went through the door, I wasn't coming back. I realised that very strongly for some reason. And I was tempted. Because my mother had sold it to me. She'd sold the idea of heaven to me very, very well. And I was having this internal dialogue and a dialogue with this gentleman, and he just kept knocking the ball back into my court. What do you want to do, Kevin? You're here now. This is your choice. What do you want to do? You can go back. You can come. You can stay. You're welcome. Yeah, all this. I knew what was going on. I knew the rules. And I had, again, a very strong internal dialogue with myself. And as tempted as I was to go and see the wonderful animals and the singing flowers and all this kind of stuff that my mother had described, I knew I had to go back. I knew I had a lot more to do. I knew I had things to accomplish that I hadn't done in my 55 years of physical life. mortal life. And I said to the gentleman, I think I need to go home. He just nodded and said, are you sure? He made sure that I was positive about my choice and decision. And I said, yeah, I need to go back. And next thing, I woke up in the bed. I woke up in my hospital bed. About 15 minutes, I think, had passed, but it felt different. My leg was a mess. I knew that, but I also felt something in the room. Now, I've worked within spiritual healing at that point. 1985, I started doing spiritual healing and training to be spiritual healing. I've done various aspects of that and still do to this day. So I was aware of the power of spiritual healing, but around me in the bed, there was like a donut. It was like I was encased in this little or large donut. I could feel it, and something felt different. The voice in my head said, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be all right. And I believed it. I knew. I didn't know at the time, because I was a bit out of it with the sepsis. I'd been not very well, obviously. My wife had gone on to social media, onto Facebook. And at the time I was working as a distance healer. We would send healing out around the world. And she'd gone to them and said, could you send healing out for Kevin? So there were about 1,000 of those healers all around the world. They were sending me. My friends on Facebook, altogether there were probably 1,500 to 2,000 people praying for me at that time. People of all faiths, Christians, agnostics, atheists, spiritualists, Wiccans, witches. They were just sending me their love and their light and their energy. And I could feel it. And I knew, as I said, I knew everything was going to be okay. 9 o'clock came, my surgeon came in, who was very blunt, as was I, especially with the sepsis. And he said, are you okay for your leg to be chopped off? I said, yeah, no problem, do it. And he said, well, you're first on the list because we need to, because the day before, the black had gone up my leg and was probably on my shin. And obviously, as I said, if it goes over the knee, then good night, Vienna. And a nurse came in who I'd not seen before, a head nurse. And he said to her, look at Kevin's injury, because it was the worst injury to a foot they'd ever had, where the leg had not immediately had to be amputated. It was a mess. It was absolutely ripped to pieces. And she did all the bandages off and everything else. And she looked at it. And she looked at it very strangely. And I was used to that, because people looked at it going, ooh. In fact, they would send the student nurses around to look at it, because this kind of injury you never saw. You saw it in textbooks, you never saw it in real life. It was so rare where the leg, as I say, had not been immediately had to be amputated. And she said, oh my God, this is amazing. I thought, okay, that's not the reaction that I was expecting. She called the doctor over and he said, oh, I've seen it. I was the one who did the surgery. And she insisted. And he came over begrudgingly and he looked at it and he swore. And I thought, well, that can't be good. That can't be good. So I asked them to let me in on it, really, because, this is my blinking foot. I'd like to blink and blink and know what's blinking going on, please, if you don't mind. Because looking at your faces, I'm now worried. What's down there, a hoof? And some kind of alien probe? What's going on here? And he said, well, look for yourself. Which I didn't like doing, because I'd seen it a couple of times and it was like something out of a horror film. And I looked at it, Phil, and it was as pink as a baby's backside. And he said, where's it gone from yesterday? And I said, I don't know. I thought, well, I've got an idea, but I'm not going to tell you because you're not going to understand. And I remember the words, it's going to be okay. And all trace of sepsis had gone from my leg and my foot. And they couldn't understand why or how. I spent over a month in hospital recuperating. The only one who kind of understood me was a hospital chaplain who was also a trained medic and had seen my notes and said, you shouldn't be here. A, you shouldn't be here, and B, you should have one leg less than me. And we talked about the healing power of God's divine love. And we talked about that for an hour and we prayed. And she said, I completely get it. I completely understand. And we talked about spiritual healing. And some of the nurses understood it as well. They'd seen it happen before. But it was a phenomenal experience, Phil. And one that, again, is very hard to put into words. Even 6 years down the line, I recall all of it. I know it wasn't a dream. I don't remember my dreams. I remember this one, 6 years on, every second of it. It's very clear in my mind, very, very clear in my mind. And for me, it's given me the knowledge. I mean, I already believed in life after death. I'd been studying it since I was a child, growing up in haunted houses. And I'd got into spiritualism in the UK in the 1980s when I was in my very early 20s. So I had that belief structure and system there, but this just reinforced it. And the compassion, the love in that room no trace of judgment, no trace of anything like, oh, you've been a bad boy, go and stand in the corner, you have to go over here and do that. No, it was all about me, all about my acceptance of where I was and my choice to go through that door and cease to be in the physical realm, or go back and make a difference. And since coming back, I've worked hard to make a difference. It's not been easy. I have to have some further surgery next year. A tiny part of the foot hasn't healed as we would like, and it keeps getting infected, so I have to go in and have a little bit of further amputation done, which I'm not looking forward to, but I'm still here. I'm alive. I function very, very well. And I've tried to make a difference. I've tried to become more interactive with society, with the community. I've set up workshops in meditation, healing. I do a lot of readings for people now, which I did before, but I tailed away from it. I try to be more of service, and every day is a gift, every day is a blessing, and I think that's the major lesson that's come through. Every day is a complete blessing. Every day should be taken seriously, not too seriously. Always make room for singing and dancing, but at the same time, every day is precious, and is not to be wasted. And even if we do one thing a day, that's what I took from it, to make the most of my life, and in trying to help other people now, in as many ways as I can find possible to do that. And that comes from that experience, from that near-death experience on October the 11th, 2018, which was ironically my mother's birthday. So it's a really good experience, and I love sharing it with people, because I really hope that it gives, hope that A, life goes on, B, we will see our loved ones again. And everything is love, everything is compassion and empathy. There is no judgment, there is no, it's just love, it's just pure love. And I really love that, and that's what I've taken forward. And that's the message that I like to try and share. And thank you for the opportunity for sharing it today. It's been a real life changer since 2018. But as I say, every day is precious. Make the most of every day. Thank you for listening.
How is this story meaningful to you? If you're watching on YouTube, tell us in the comments. If you're listening to the podcast, leave a review and tell us there. If you or someone you know have a similar kind of story, please also leave that in the comments or send us a message at our website. Maybe we'll feature you. Visit nottheendNDE.com. Be blessed and a blessing, my friends.